And for more, we're very pleased to be joined by State Senator Barbara Buono. Senator, thank you very much for a few minutes. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You know, before we get into where the investigation should or could go from here, on a personal level, when you saw the transcript and you saw both an aide and an appointee of Christie saying and having fun, saying, I hope they're the children of Buono voters, what was your reaction?
You know, my aide was reading it to me off of his phone, and I didn't believe him that they were so, I was horrified that they would be so flip about using their political power to obviously punish someone, to enact political retribution, and have absolutely no concern whatsoever for the people of New Jersey that were being affected, either the kids that couldn't get to school, people who couldn't get to work, first responders who couldn't get people to get the care that they need. You know, I wasn't surprised that this happened, that it was an act of political retribution. And I've worked up close and personal with this governor for 4 years, and in particular in the political campaign. And so when this surfaced initially in early September, I knew what had happened in my heart of hearts, and I talked about it. I talked about it on national TV when we did our debates, but unfortunately, nobody paid attention at the time. So I'm relieved. I'm relieved for democracy, because it's so much more than just political retribution in terms of the impact it has in the long term. It impacts our democracy. It thwarts democracy. And you know, the people of New Jersey deserve to have people that are sworn into office with their best interests at heart, working for them, and to use use the levers of power to exact political revenge against someone who doesn't go your way, who doesn't vote for something, is not the way it's supposed to work.
You know, when you first commented on this developing scandal, you said it's not just an administration, it's a paramilitary organization talking about the Christie administration. Why did you call it that?
Because I've always thought of it that way. You know, it's just the way they conduct themselves. It's very well disciplined. It's paramilitary in the way they conduct themselves, that there is such strict discipline. It is a strict top-to-bottom model of governing. And so to suggest that the governor didn't know anything about, well, in particular, when the #1 Port Authority appointee from New York, Patrick Foy, wrote a letter when the lanes were still closed and said that he thought that he was shocked, he was offended, and he thought laws, both state and federal, might have been broken. To then suggest that this was not passed along to the governor of the state of New Jersey is absurd. You know, we know that the governor's those in his close orbit knew, and if his assistant or his deputy chief of staff knew then and ordered it, you know that the deputy chief of staff answers to the chief of staff. And so, because knowing what a disciplined political organization this administration was, it is just it strains credulity to suggest that the governor didn't know anything. The governor knows there's nothing that goes on that this governor isn't aware of first.
You know, Senator, you're not the only one who raised questions of this back in September, but it's funny, over the past weekend I've spoken to some folks who are pretty wired who say, well, some of the people who tried to tamp down the idea of an investigation were even some Democratic Party brokers. Speak to that a little bit. Why did this take so long to finally see the light of day? And did maybe even some leadership in your own party not do as much as they could have to bring this to the public here before the election, obviously, that happened in the fall?
Well, you know, I'm not going to comment directly on that, except to say, you know, it's common knowledge that the Senate president worked hand in hand with George Norcross to get this governor elected. They have a very good working relationship, and I had very little, if any, direct or indirect support from the Democratic Party.
Did any Democratic mayors come to you and say, listen, Senator, I'd love to support you, but I'm worried about payback here from the governor or his administration if I cross him?
Well, not directly, but I will say this, that when I tried to raise money, and obviously that was a big obstacle for someone who is a non-incumbent against an incumbent is quite a prolific fundraiser. When I would call people up to raise money, they would be very direct with me and say, listen, Barbara, this is a guy, and somebody said these exact words, this is someone who wants to hurt people. And so I will contribute up until there's a threshold, a $300 threshold that people can contribute up to, and it is not reportable. In other words, everything that I get, I have to report to the election law enforcement that is above $300 increments. And so I had to say, look, please give me the $300. I won't report it. It's not legally reportable. And that's how it really crimped my ability to raise larger sums of money.
Finally, Senator, let's talk about
people were afraid. Lobbyists were very concerned that it would. It's okay. Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you where you believe the investigation goes from here. Obviously, you have various agencies looking into this. Now, the Stronger Than the Storm ad campaign, there's questions about how the agency was selected, how the funds were appropriated, and obviously how many other people were connected other than the 3 names we know so far in the shutdown of the GWB. Talk about, from your end, what do you think the most important questions and the most important agencies to get to the bottom of this will be?
Well, you raise an interesting issue. Now people are talking about a separate but related issue, and that is the alleged misuse of Sandy relief funds. And again, that was something I made a lot of noise about during the election, because the governor had his hand-picked political appointee from the U.S. Attorney's Office heading up the committee that awarded the bid, Michelle Brown. And there were 2 bids to have a tourism ad campaign, and this committee, headed by Michelle Brown, chose the higher bid, $2 million higher, and the major difference was that it featured the governor and his family in the commercials. And I said that this was, that $2 million could have been much better spent giving it to the Sandy relief, the folks that were still, so many of them, as we know right now, are displaced from their homes and really suffering in the wake of Superstorm Sandy. So I think that what we're seeing here, and as the probe widens, I think the issue that people will want to know is, was this part of a bigger pattern, as I saw it early on in the campaign, of a governor who's more concerned with promoting his own political career, his political future, rather than taking actions that would benefit the people of New Jersey in their daily lives. The Sandy funds are one example. He vetoed a gun assault, 50 caliber assault rifle ban that he supported back in April. He vetoed it after he got a letter from a gun rights activist group in New Hampshire telling him in no uncertain terms that if he signed the bill that we as the legislature sent to him, that they would work actively against him in the New Hampshire presidential primary. Now, I asked the Senate president to have a veto, asked to schedule a Senate session so that we could have the opportunity to override the governor's veto, and we never had that either. So there was very little cooperation, very little support in that regard.
Finally, Senator, there are some in Trenton who are already talking about the potential of impeachment depending on how this investigation goes. Give an idea to the constituents. What is the threshold that would have to be reached to remove a governor if this story grows as you believe it will?
Well, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves, quite frankly. The investigation has barely begun. The the U.S. Attorney's Office is investigating it. But if the Assembly Committee finds that there was a cover-up, which it appears that there was a cover-up in some of the emails, when they came up with this, they concocted this theory of a phantom traffic study to justify the closure of the lanes. If in fact there's found that there was a cover-up of this retaliatory act of closing lanes, then that would rise to the level of an impeachable crime. But what has to happen under New Jersey state law is the Assembly, the action would have to originate in the lower house, the Assembly. They would have to vote out a resolution the articles of impeachment by a simple majority. And if that passed, then it would be sent to the Senate where they would actually try the case. But as I said, I think we're getting way ahead of ourselves at this point. There's a lot of unanswered questions. There's even just starting with the so much was redacted, blocked out in the emails that we have no explanation for. For example, when David Wildstein had something blacked out that he submitted where some unidentified person asked the question, am I wrong to be smiling at, basically at all the havoc that was being created, and whoever emailed that's name is blocked out. Now, why should that be? And so we really need to, we have a lot of layers of the onion to peel back before we get to any discussion of impeachment.
Fair enough, Senator. I do appreciate a few minutes on what I know is very busy times in Trenton right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.